Hello, we're joined by Jeremy Glyn today, and we're going to be discussing his Pearl of Wisdom. Hello, Jeremy, how are you doing? Thank you for joining us again.
Bill, I'm fine, thank you. Bettina, nice to see you as well. Nice to see you both.
Good to see you.
Quite shaken when I was asked to come up with a pearl. And I don't know if this is what you want to hear, but what I thought I would talk about to start with is something that's so desperately obvious, but a lot of people don't understand. I separate muscle response testing, which I normally refer to as MRT, from kinesiology, and indeed from my own sort of mindset priming that I do, because I think MRT is quite separate. I've heard other therapists saying they do kinesiology and they don't understand anything about kinesiology at all, but they use MRT. So MRT is a wonderful tool. I sometimes describe it that these days, if you're going to have your car serviced, you take the car to the garage. And in the old days, a mechanic opened a bonnet and looked under it and prodded and probed and tried to work out what wasn't working and then did something because they'd been trained how to do it. That doesn't happen these days. These days, the car's connected to a computer and the computer whizzes and whirs and out comes, this isn't running smoothly, this needs fine tuning. And the mechanic, or if you like, the human mechanic, if we're talking in kinesiology terms, understands he's got or she's got the tools and training to fix what needs fixing. The MRT tool is the equivalent of the computer coming up with what needs to be fixed and in what sequence. So that for me is how kinesiology, all the different kinesiologies work. As far as I know, all kinesiologies use the MRT technique to, you could describe as allow the client to communicate with the kinesiologist what they would like done, what they need done, and in what sequence would be appropriate for them on that day. And one of the things I love about it is that it isn't always appropriate. I remember one poor lady many years ago, long time ago, when I had a clinic in London, she drove her daughter all the way from Somerset on a Friday afternoon to have a session with me when I was helping people with dyslexia a lot. And they arrived at about 2:30, I think. And it wasn't appropriate to do any work with her. And I thought, well, maybe they were both a little agitated. I thought, well, maybe they just had a horrible long drive from Somerset, and it's a long drive. So maybe, I said, well, relax, go and have a cup of tea, have a cup of coffee, do some shopping, come back in an hour. I've got another free appointment later on, so come back later. Thinking that would be helpful. They came back later. It still wasn't appropriate to work on the daughter. So the poor things, and it was pouring with rain. I hadn't mentioned that. The one thing you don't want to do at about 3:30 on a Friday afternoon in London is head off for Somerset, because you're going to have a very long, very boring, very nasty drive when everyone else is commuting. So that was a case where, tragically, it wasn't appropriate to help that girl at all. Whether because I reminded her of some horrible teacher at school who'd been beastly to her, I don't know, but for some reason, it wasn't appropriate to work. And I love the fact that the testing that we do will identify that. And there was another occasion I was helping a cancer patient, who I'll probably refer to later. The doctor had sent him to me, he came every week. And we did some work, we balanced him. And this particular week, he said it wasn't appropriate. And he said, what do you mean it's not appropriate? What's going on? I said, I don't know, maybe your body's processing something that the hospital's done with you. Let's respect that. It's not appropriate to work today. We'll have a chat, have a cup of tea, come back next week. So I love the fact, I love lots about this way of working. I love the fact the client's in charge. Is it appropriate to work? Yes. If so, in what way? In what priority? In what sequence? On what focus? What application? I'll come back to that. And I love the fact that kinesiology addresses so many different elements of us. It's not just the physical. It's not just, it can be the emotional world. It can be psychological stuff as well. It can be subtle energy stuff, lots and lots of things. And the client will just communicate what we can do. Well, I thought it might be fun. I think it's nearly 40 years, and I'm a comparative new boy, I suspect, compared to the others you're filming and talking to from the days of the KF. I was absolutely one of the new boys when the KF was originated. So I just thought it might there'll be some people watching this who maybe haven't come across kinesiology before or not done very much with it. And I thought if I shared a few stories that sort of moved me and that I just love to tell, really. It might help people understand the range of it all. So as I suggested earlier, that sometimes people just have a sort of a general session, and sometimes a session will be on a particular focus that is important to them, and sometimes it might be they have a goal they want to achieve, and the subconscious will help them get in touch with how they'd really like that to be and what's stopping them. But one of the earliest things when I was doing dyslexia work, there was two children came to see me, two brother and sister, about 6 and 8, who the boy hardly read at all. It was sort of that slow. And the girl was a little bit better, but very hesitant. And with the wonders of, I think, what came from Educate, was one of the early kinesiologies I studied. There was a technique in that was very quick. And I just did it with them. And I recorded them both. And I used to play the recordings to people, and they were gobsmacked. Because in the second recording, the girl, well, let's start with the boy. The young boy in the second recording reads completely fluently. And in the middle of it, you can hear him saying, "I don't believe this." He never read like that in his life. And his elder sister, a little bit later, who'd been stumbling through the first reading she did, and it was Winnie the Pooh, I think I got them to read. In the second reading, she's reading completely fluently. They're also taking on a different voice for the different characters she's reading. And it was just astonishing transformation. And that's life-changing, that sort of Educate work. Then it's sort of very different. When I did 3-in-1 concept kinesiology, we were studying in America, and 2 of us were asked to go and help a young, well, he was in his late 20s, someone who'd been a child superstar in Hollywood, we were over in California. He'd been terribly badly hurt in a car crash, and he was awfully mangled, and he could only walk by kind of rotating his hips one at a time, and it was awful to watch, but you couldn't not watch that. It would have been ruder and more hurtful. And we balanced him, 2 of us, for quite a long time. And at the end, he said, "Very kind of you, but don't feel any different. Thank you very much." And we went away. And the next morning, Gordon Stokes said to us that the client we'd worked on had rung him that night and said, "Would he please," I get very emotional, "would he please share with us that he didn't think anything had happened. He told us he didn't feel any different. But that afternoon he'd gone swimming in his friend's pool, which he did every day, because of lovely weather, and he made frightful splashing noises because he was so uncoordinated, but it was private, so it didn't matter. But he said to Gordon, "Would you please tell them that for the last 2 years when I swim, my feet have hit each other, and they don't anymore." And I was absolutely gobsmacked that one balance, it hasn't made it better, it hasn't transformed things, but it made a sufficiently big difference that his feet didn't hit each other. And there are other stories as well that are remarkable of that ilk, but switching tactics a little bit perhaps, again though with a general balance. I mentioned the man earlier that I worked on with cancer, and he'd had a very major operation. He was really very weak, and again I worked with a surrogate working with him, which is a lovely way of working when someone themselves is not really very much with us. And it wasn't appropriate to tell him what we were working with. It was just, we just got on and did the work. It was and it was all about fear. I was using 3-in-1's behavioural barometer to get in touch with the emotions that were going on. And it wasn't about fear of dying, but fear of the consequences that would be for his family and his now wife that would make. Lots of fear. And we went back into memory, and his mother had died the 3rd time she got cancer. This was the 2nd time he had cancer, and so on. And it so happened that at the end of the session, he left his watch behind that night in my clinic in London. And we knew each other well by then, because I'd helped him the first time he had cancer as well. And he came around to my house to pick up his watch the next morning. And the doorbell rang, I opened the door. And before I could say a word, he said, "I don't know what you did last night, but the fear's all gone." This stuff is quite amazing, whether you're talking about the physical injury of the man in the pool with his feet, or whether you're talking to someone with this awful amount of fear inside them. And then there's pain. You can bear another couple of stories. I went on holiday. I don't often get looked after myself. I took myself on a holiday in Portugal, the Club Med holiday, I think, where they had aromatherapists on the golf course. And I thought, well, the two of them will do me a lot of good. And I got several rounds of golf. I didn't get any aromatherapy at all, but that's a slightly different story. But part of the reason was that I happened to be in the bar the first night, and there was a girl there with a very heavily bandaged right finger on her right hand, and wincing with pain a lot. I said, that looks very, very painful. She said, it is. On a scale of 1 to 10, if 10's the worst pain, oh, she said about 8. So it really was a big pain. I said, well, I might be able to help. And she looked horrified. And I said, well, I don't think I'd need to touch you necessarily. So she looked very puzzled. And she came up to me. I said, are you serious? I said, well, and we disappeared discreetly, into the corner of the bar. And I just did some energy work around the hand. And she had her elbow on the table and she said, hey, I can see things running up and down here. Something's running up and down. After a bit, she began prodding her hand and saying, it's extraordinary, but there's no pain at all. I didn't know how to thank you. I said, no, she said, I'm not thanking you for taking the pain away. I thought, I've got a complete nutter here. She said, no, she said, you think of me as an aromatherapist? I said, yes. She said, well, I am, but I'm also a very qualified physiotherapist. And what you've done is medically impossible. I'm going to go back and look at my books and start all over again. Thank you very much for opening my mind to some of these sort of complimentary things I'd never really taken seriously before. And then I haven't given you an example of goal balances, but I love these. Goal balance when the subconscious picks a time in the future. The client then consciously describes how they'd like things to be. Then the subconscious, no, you can do better than that. You want something nicer than that, and puts bells and whistles on, I sometimes describe it. And working with some of the sports people I've worked with, this has been fascinating. In fact, I'll read you if I may, because this guy did really well. Goldie behind me was a sort of Olympian. And this guy never been to the Olympics. When I worked with him, he was a 19-year-old running 200 meters. This was back in 2015. And he said, mindset priming was hugely relevant to me in achieving my goals. I've now set myself more ambitious targets. I'm very keen to have a later session to see if I can stretch my goals further. The sessions have unblocked my inner self-belief, removed negative energy, and given me a clear mindset. Well, that was a 19-year-old 200 meter in 2015. In 2016, he got the bronze medal in the British Championships. A year later, he got the gold medal for the British 100 meters. And in the same year, came 7th in the world. Great fun. Great. But the bit about the goal balances I particularly like, and one of the things that really convinced me quite early on that how valid this work is and how valid MRT is as a technique. The client describes how they want things to be, the subconscious then fine-tunes it. And sometimes the client's left something out. There's a bit missing, and as far as their subconscious is concerned, no, that's important. That needs to be, if we really talk about how you really want your life to be, that needs to be in the picture. So one last story. It was one of the first goal balances I ever did. And it was a lady in her early 30s. She had a couple of children. And the date she picked on the future really excited her, because by then her other half, her partner, they were going to be living together in the same house. Really exciting time. So the goal she described the house and the sandpit and the sort of car they were going to need because of her children and his children, and so it went on. And then the subconscious fine-tuned it and balanced it and tweaked it and put an extra bathroom, I think, in the house or something of this sort, quite practical. And we got through all of those, and then there was something missing, the subconscious said. So we went around the houses a bit, literally trying to find what else it might be that needed to be in the picture. Couldn't get it. Was it to do with the house? No. Was it to do with the car? No. Was it to do with the garden? No. Was it to do with people? It would do with people. And after a little bit of testing around, another child. And I gave her the news that the testing said there was going to be another child. And I thought, what news? They're going to have a baby. Fantastic. And she went about the colour of my sweater. And she was sweating. And she was angry as could be. I know way. I'd never seen anything like this in a session before. I had really help. And she went on. I kept testing and testing. Another child. They said, another child, the MRT said they were going to be. And after a while, she suddenly said, how far ahead are we? And I said it was 18 months or whatever. Oh, she said, there was a huge sigh and her shoulders dropped, and she said, that's extraordinary. I said, what is? She said, in 18 months' time, my sister's going to be on her round the world trip, and I promised I'd look after her daughter while she was away. That was the extra child. And I mean, what stunned me was, it was such a wonderful example that when we work with clients, their subconscious knows what's going on for them. Their subconscious knows everything there is to know. And that was a wonderful example about, let's have an accurate picture. Let's have that child in the picture, please, because it's going to be there. And she'd consciously forgotten all about it. So there's a few stories, and maybe it helps to explain the sort of passion I have for it, whether it's dyslexic people or physically damaged people or emotionally upset people or people who just aren't on the right track for them and aren't having a sort of fulfilling life at the moment. And it's just so wonderful to be able to help people and in the way that we do. So my pearl, if you like, is that alongside the kinesiology work that I've done for nearly 40 years, I've got so much sort of buzz and excitement and amazement from working with the different branches of kinesiology that I've studied. And in parallel with that, for about 35 years, I've also run psychology workshops in businesses. And there was quite a parallel with some of that and some with the 3-in-1 concept kinesiology, because it was explaining to people the interactions between the conscious and the subconscious mind. But one thing that the psychology gave them was an understanding of how to make change in a natural and instinctive way, so that if they've been stuck in a comfort zone here and they actually would like their life to change, so they're over here, that they need to change their self-image, change their comfort zone, and introduce a comfortable way of doing it. And I realized after many years of balancing people with 3-in-1 concepts and the other kinesiologies that bit was missing. In an ordinary goal balance, an ordinary kinesiology goal balance, someone's clear that they want to move from here to here, and they've got rid of the resistance holding them back, but they don't know how to make the journey. And so I began wondering whether it wasn't possible to integrate these mindset priming insights into my kinesiology balances. And I have been absolutely astonished by how well that works and how the clients are able to dip in and say, yes, I didn't understand about that, but I'd like to know a bit about this, because it's almost literally, that's kind of what happens. So I've got to say, tell me about that, tell me about that, tell me about that, please, because that will help me. And so what I've got is some slides, perhaps, that especially for those, again, who may not be familiar with kinesiology or may even be in the coaching world or whatever and needing to help people, some slides which I think will help you understand that, and what, again, it's linking this muscle response testing, the MRT, in with the work that I did before that help integrate it all and bring it all together. So those, I'd just like to show some slides, and if I may, I'll share my screen with you now. My pearl, if you like, I see is what happens when you integrate MRT with kinesiology balances and the ABC of success concepts into what I call mindset priming. So the insights that people get from the ABC of success, and this is a workshop that I got accredited by the KF some years ago. 4 key insights. When do you limit your ambitions and goal setting? Why has your initial progress tended to revert to the earlier level? What 4 things inhibit your progress? And it's so interesting, there just seem to be 4. And the 4th one is, how do instinctively successful people sustain progress? So the concepts in each of those are the ones that people can access through the muscle response testing when we're having a session. So mindset priming will help you address hidden causes of not aspiring to your ideal life. And my experience is I haven't yet met anybody I've worked with who consciously describes their ideal goal. Everyone sets them shorter for some reason. Then subconscious sabotage. What is it that's holding us back? I sometimes describe it as well, I'll come to that in a minute. Any reluctance to embrace change, and people avoid change because very often it's that in the past they've struggled and struggled to bring about a change they wanted, and it was an uncomfortable process because they weren't using an appropriate way, and it didn't last. Things went back to the way they were. Well, if it's not going to last, it's going to be a struggle and going to be uncomfortable, why bother? We get creative about justifying why not to change until we understand that there's a way that makes it very comfortable, which is the last line: equips you to make sustainable change comfortably. That's what mindset priming can do by incorporating these psychological insights into the kinesiology balances. So a conventional coaching model, just to show the contrast, might typically go, why aren't you happy with, what's your goal, how would you like things to be? And they might go into what's stopping you, and let's make an action plan, and on we go. The mindset priming model uses the ABC of success, where the B is your being, your current behavior. The A is your aspirations. The C is your conditioning, which potentially is holding you back. And that's where these just four things lurk there, that over and over again between them are what held people back from achieving their goals. But the next one is perhaps the most important of all, the D, what's driving our behavior. Because our free-flowing behavior, the being that we are, is a reflection of our subconscious self-image and self-concept. And I'll come back to that in a moment. That's what drives our current behavior. When we go for a drive these days, the car does all the hard work for us. We decide where we want to go, and then we get in the car and we turn on the ignition, and that gets the engine going. Then we set the sat nav, release the handbrake, and the car majestically takes us where we want to go. But we're rather less efficient than that, because if we don't have MRT and we don't understand about mindset priming, or have someone to do that for us, then our self-concept, which, as I say, drives our behavior, that's made up of our self-talk, where we say about ourselves, what we know about ourselves to be, and that builds our self-image. But also the other part of our self-concept is our self-efficacy, what we believe we can do. And that's not a typo. It's not over there by mistake. It's over there on purpose, because, as I said, people's aspirations are normally well short of what they subconsciously believe they can do. So with this mindset priming approach, if in a goal balance, the first thing people do is stretch their goal to the limit of their self-efficacy. Then the concepts I've been describing help them understand how to make this change in a comfortable, instinctive way that will guarantee that changes will be sustainable. And that involves changing the self-concept. So change the self-talk, change the self-concept, you get a new self-image, and that then will underpin the person you want to be. So the MRT helps people identify precisely how to do that and make sure that the change is a comfortable and sustainable process. And I love working with it, because it fascinates me how the client just picks off the mindset menu the concepts they need to understand to enable them to confidently stretch their goal, to understand how to make the change comfortably, and also to get rid of and work on that sabotage that's been holding them back until now. So it's easy to see how the four insights fit in with the ABC model. When we're limiting our goal settings about the aspirations, why we revert to the status quo about our self-image, what four things hold us back are the conditioning, and the technique of how to move on and achieve our goals is what instinctively successful people do. And the key to sustainable improvements, therefore, I suggest, and this is my pearl, to get you to A from B, to get you to your aspired goals from your current behavior and being, your coach needs MRT to be able to work on your conditioning and on your description of yourself. I've become absolutely convinced of that this MRT tool is what enables us to like I said at the beginning, with the Clubley service enables to get in touch with what's not working quite smoothly, what needs to be fine-tuned, and then we can get on and use our skills and tools to make it happen. So that's my gem. If this is new to you and you've not come across the kinesiology before, please get in touch with the Kinesiology Federation, celebrating our birthday today, this year, and I've loved every minute of working with it. And if you want to know more about the mindset priming, then please do contact me at Pathfinders. So that's my pearl. I'd love to share lots more stories with you if it interests you, because there have been some wonderful, wonderful stories, and I'm sure you've heard wonderful stories from lots of other people too. But thank you for the opportunity of sharing my pearl with you, and keep well.
Thank you, Jeremy. That's great.
That was fab. Thank you.
But I'd like to know, have you seen changes in other people around the person that you were helping? Have you had experience with people that you worked with that then came back to you and said, since our session, my dad, my partner, my kid, you know, the relationship with them?
Let me stop screen sharing. Shall I stop screen sharing for a moment?
Yeah.
I got an email last night from a lady in France who I hadn't seen for about 30 years. Dear Jeremy, I will never forget how you changed my daughter's lives and mine. I guess in that case, I worked with several members of the family.
Okay.
And that made an impact. And one of them came on a fairly regular basis, rather like putting a car in for service was the analogy I used on that. But I sometimes actually wish that there was more follow-up. Perhaps I didn't used to be very good at going after people and asking for comments. I did speak to her. I rang a mother the other day whose dyslexic child I'd helped 30 years ago. I just happened to come across a letter she sent me thanking me for it. And I got in touch and they hadn't moved, so the phone number responded and she was amazed to hear. And I got some feedback about how her son, as it was that I'd worked on, had made progress on things, and that was lovely to hear. And she said that she still used some of the exercises that I taught them, some of the EK stuff that I taught, she said she was still using. So that was a benefit that she got from that process. I remember that I think I shared the story of the dyslexic boy who said his alphabet for the first time. I think I shared that with you on the other recording. And I never saw or heard from them again. I mean, I just wonder what impact, I mean, that must have had a knock-on effect within the family when their own perception of his abilities would have changed, and the fact that he was more teachable and everything else than they'd understood before. So there must have been ongoing impacts there. And the cancer man, he was convinced he was going to die. With the goal setting, for him, the goal setting balance we did once with him, his subconscious picked a time in the future. It was about 18 months or 2 years ahead, and all he could see was black. He was convinced he wasn't going to be around anymore. And I knew when I say you're not getting out of here till you come up with a picture your subconscious is happy with, and we worked away and he came up with an elaborate picture of him. I won't be specific, but living abroad and able to do certain activities and not other things, and having a nice life. And 15 years later, he was doing exactly that, living exactly where he'd identified in that goal balance. And that would have had a knock-on effect clearly to his family. But perhaps I wasn't good at chasing up or looking for feedback and getting feedback, so I can't actually describe, I heard from A that this had happened after the session with B. Yeah. Sadly, but I'd love to, really good question. Have you had good? I'd love to hear the answers from some of the other people you're talking to about that, because I'd be really interesting to hear what the knock-on benefits are to families of the work we do.
But I think, yeah, the conditioning part is so important, isn't it? That it's a lot what we're not. It's a lot about the subconscious, isn't it? You know, you can be aware of yourself. You can have a self-image that might or might not reflect how others see you or how you really are, and the achievement that you want to, where you want to be. But the conditioning, you know, so similar to, I think it was Carrie saying about what's his name, Bruce Lipton about the environment, how the environment shapes you. And that's a lot of subconscious, isn't it? I mean, since I've had a child, you know, you just realize how much kind of, can you call it traces, or I don't know, it's something that you say and you think, wow, was that really me? That sounded like my mother. You know, but it's so subconscious, your first reaction, because you might have heard it so many times. Or, oh, I've reacted exactly like my dad reacted it when I was my son's age. And there's so much coming out, but some people might not be aware of that, or haven't got that affinity to see that. And the conditioning is such a big thing. But
I don't know how anybody can see it for themselves. The four things of beliefs, expectations, habits, and attitudes, the four things that go into that conditioning. And some of those things get ingrained in us as a child. We sort of pick it up because that's the way our family is. That's the beliefs our parents have, the expectations our parents have. I mean, a child growing up in a house full of pessimists or pessimistic parents, I dread to think what expectations they'd have of life. They wouldn't be people likely to set sort of positive goals or aspirations for themselves, because all around them was this, oh no, it'll never work sort of stuff going on. Just a very crude example. And the beliefs that people get in their head, which can link, of course, to expectations and attitudes as well. We're so curiously glued together. One of the things I love teaching people about is cognitive dissonance, where if we have a very strong enough belief about something, like the dyslexic boy who couldn't say his alphabet, that was the example I think I gave in my original talk. His belief was so strong that he was so thick and stupid he couldn't say his alphabet, that he could say it in one sentence and deny he said it in the next, because his subconscious was protecting him from evidence that contradicted his belief. So I've been talking to so many people lately, I can't remember who tried to tell what story to. Did I tell you about Gordon Stokes of 3 in 1 and when he went on his Navy training? No. Gordon Stokes, one of the greatest teachers I've ever come across. I could go on and on about how wonderful he was as a teacher. And this wonderful kinesiologist creating 3 in 1 concepts. When he was at school, he was a thicko. And he was told he was a thicko. In fact, he kept putting, the school they had in America, the thicker you were, the worse you were doing in your tests, you went further and further back in the classroom. So if you were in the back row of the classroom, you really knew you were the ultimate thicko, and you know, there weren't. And he was always in the back, he ended up in the back row, year after year. And he couldn't see very well. And he didn't see as they were called in those days, blackboards, which he wrote on with chalk. And the further away it was from the blackboard, the harder it was to see, the he did less and less well at school. And he left school having had years and years and years of being told you're thick, you're stupid, you're blah, 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 blah. Okay. And in those days, he was of an age when in America, you had to do the equivalent of national service, we used to call it over here. And for some reason, despite living bang in the middle of America, he wanted to go in the Navy, like as far away from home as he could get. And he told me a wonderful story. He said, I was on a train going to the West Coast, I think was where the naval base was. On the train going to the West Coast. And I sat on the train and it occurred to me, he said, there's no one at the naval base that knows I'm thick. And I think I'm quite bright, really. And he got to the naval base, and one of the first things they did was give him an eye test. And of course, the eye test showed up and he needed glasses, so he gets his glasses. And he passed out top of the Naval College. Now, thank goodness, something inside him told him he was a bright guy.
Yeah.
And he managed to question this training, these beliefs that have been thrown at him. And so many people of the dyslexic people I used to work with, you know, it's back in the bad old days, they were told maybe by their parents, maybe by their siblings, but not just the teachers. You know, yes, they say, you can't even do this. Oh, I've got it. And the self-talk starts kicking in. I've got it. I'm sick. I'm stupid. And that builds up and builds up and builds up, and that becomes an unshakable belief. And if you're not careful, that's going to limit your aspiration. And you're so right, Bettina. I mean, it's that conditioning bit that I think it's, and I've had lots of work done on me, balances done on me, sessions done on me over the years. Just recently, I've had all sorts of help, and goodness gracious me, something came up that had never appeared before. I mean, I'd been sort of not neglecting my own needs, shall we say, and that goes, it's a sort of lifelong habit that was one of the 4 things: habits, beliefs, attitudes. A lifelong habit I've had of not really respecting my own needs and looking after myself properly. And that's never come up before. I'd never registered that before, and it's I could have done without that, I must admit. So at least I found it now and can do some work on it. But it's yeah. I mean, I think that's well, in the way that I work, and having brought those sort of psychological concepts in there, I think it's accessing that conditioning stuff is massive. In fact, it's not just that though. I mean, yes, that's very difficult to get at. It's not easy to get at what our self-image is all about. We can't necessarily identify that for ourselves. If someone says, okay, what's your subconscious self-image? You might say, well, I expect it thinks I'm a lousy driver or a lousy cook and good at this and not good at that. I mean, you could guess at a few things, but you're not going to get it all right. And I ran a 6-day workshop on those concepts once for a room full of psychologists. It was a fairly daunting thing to do because I'd never studied psychology in my life. And at the end of it, the senior partner said, effectively, that's been stupid. Short version was, he said, everyone in the room knows more about psychology than you. Yeah. He said, what's been stupid is you've shown me practical applications of concepts I've been working with for 30 years that I've never dreamt of. And now I understand how it relates to my hobbies and my health and my marriage and. I went, oh, okay. However, it's really difficult for an individual to access these things for themselves. And the muscle testing tool that we all use is a wonderful way of doing it. I mean, it's, and I would say bring in the psychology stuff as well, because that will help people get an even better understanding of where it is, what it is, and how to deal with it, which is what I think we all need.
And I love the concept of the break, yeah, that's holding you back. And if somebody can just, or yourself, someone can work on that to release that break, then you can just go. I love that.
I felt a bit stupid. I got in my car the other day. I mean, it really was a message of how much better the car is than we are. I got in my car, started it up. For whatever reason, we said, I must have been in a hurry or something. You haven't released your handbrake. I thought, oh, no. The car can tell me I've still got the handbrake. I can't tell myself. In fact, my own life. I wish I had a sort of dashboard somewhere I could have a look at to see what I needed to do to help myself get on the right track.
Beautiful. I love it. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Nice to see you both as ever. And you're doing wonderful work, and it's lovely to celebrate the KF's birthday.
Thank you so much for your time, Jeremy.
No.
All your stories and all your experience. I could sit here for hours and just listen to
one of the difficulties of living on your own is you don't get a chance to talk much. If you give them a chance, it's just where you put a gag in me, or I might keep going for another hour.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
You're both doing wonderful work, and thank you so much. And let's have a wonderful celebration, as I said.